lounging, son.
All right, welcome back to the Comic Lounge. This is another episode of Loungin, the show where we talk about different comic-related topics. I'm Mario.
I'm Ryan, and in case you're wondering, we are not filming at the comic shop. We are filming at my house.
Yep.
So...
Yeah, I didn't know you were on Blink-182 at some point. I like that hair. Looks good.
Yeah, I think it's kind of in line with the era of comics we're going to talk about. So I thought I would do my hair in early 2000s style.
That's cool.
Which is, like Blink-182.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
today we're talking about modern image, because we talked about in another video, we talked about 90s image and kind of how that came about in the 90s.
Yeah.
And so we want to talk about image and how they changed throughout the years in more modern times. So I think we're talking about basically post 2000s to.
I think we're probably going to jump to right around 2003, because I think that's more. I think you and I were in high school back then.
Yeah.
So that's probably, at least for me, that's when I jumped more into indie stuff. I had read of Vertigo prior, but when I'm talking about jumping into image titles.
Yeah, and I think I'm not too familiar with what even came out before, like Walking Dead. The reason we pick out that year was because that's kind of when The Walking Dead started.
Walking Dead, another one of my favorites, Invincible. So
before that, I don't even know what
I
2001,
can't
2002. I don't really know.
I don't think there was much. I mean, and I don't want to take anything away, because I could be completely wrong. There could be some great stories. I'm not aware, so I'm not going to talk about something I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. So. Yeah, I mean, like we said in the 90s, 90s were all about the art. It was artist-driven. It was about splash pages. Story was taking a back seat.
Yeah.
And not to say that there wasn't some great stuff that came out during that era. The Max is, I think, one of the high points of what Image put out, right, with having the whole package.
And that book was a book that was definitely ahead of its time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably would be a lot of people's maybe favorite books if that type of book was coming out now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think we talked about, and I talked with Jim Valentino. He took over as publisher 99 to 2004, and then Eric Larson took over. So Valentino was the one that kind of finally said okay to Kirkman about Walking Dead, and Kirkman had to lie to him, right? He had to say that it was an alien invasion was the reason for zombies, because he kept trying to push a zombie book, and he's like, Valentino's like, nobody wants a fucking zombie book, it's not going to sell. They never sell. So he lied to him about the alien invasion, and Valentino kept waiting for those aliens to come, and they never did. And he's like, I think that story's kind of interesting, you know what I mean?
Funny.
Because and like Valentino said, is if you would have just told me that the story was not about the zombies, it was about the relationships of the people and how they dealt with this zombie apocalypse, I would have said okay, because that is why that book is so great. It's not a zombie book. On surface level,
it's a character drama that happens to have zombies around it,
right? But it's and while I'll admit, I was reading it in trade. I think I jumped on when the second trade had just dropped, so it was still pretty early on in the series. But I continued on, and I eventually stopped at the volume 22 or whatever the fuck it was. I just it felt repetitive to me. I did read the final issue. I thought he ended it very well. But of his work around that era, Invincible is what really stood out to me, and it was a time when you guys talked about it on Marauders. Nick kind of briefly touched on another book. They were trying to do superhero stuff again. And I think a lot of that came from, it seems like Eric Larson might have had a little bit of idea with that, because he's about the superhero stuff, right? And Invincible was the standout from there. I think there was another book. I know Fire Breather was pretty dope. It was by Phil Hester writing and Andy Kuhn on art. There was another book about this clock guy or something. I can't even remember the name, but it was pretty interesting. I read all of them. I think there was 4 titles. But Invincible stood the test of time. It surpassed all those.
Yeah.
And I said Eric Larson. Kirkman said Eric Larson was a huge influence of that book, and he took the superhero tropes and he completely flipped them on their head and went somewhere completely unexpected, something you will never see at a Marvel and DC ever. You will not see what happened in that book and what continued to happen throughout. The gore, the fucking, just the relationship. Again, that's something Kirkman is really good at, is those relationships between characters and the small moments within this large narrative. And I don't know if you're going to continue on. I know you guys read the volume 1. I think you should. I think, personally, this is my opinion. I think you will really enjoy it. I know Nick said he stopped reading it. I think that's a fucking crime to do that. Like, if you're that far in, I don't know why you stopped, because for me, that's when the series really fucking kicks it up. But, to each his own. And then since then, there's a lot more fucking great stories. I mean, I think Kirkman even left Marvel and had his manifesto and said, I'm only doing creator-owned, which I thought was pretty cool. And that was because, like, after he got big from Walking Dead...
Yeah.
This is turning into a Kirkman episode, I'm sorry. But after, basically, like, I think that was, like, the Image revolution, right? Is, like, Kirkman, like, I'm done. I'm not writing for you guys. And that's when the top-tier talent really started to come to Image and started to push their books out through there instead of, like, Vertigo. Because I think at that point, Vertigo, I want to say, like, this is maybe like 2006, maybe later on. It started to go more on the decline.
It started getting more influence from DC.
Yeah.
And then they started, the deals they were doing with the creators was different. They were making less off of each title. Mm-hmm. Ownership started just being a little bit rougher to get around, and Image just seemed like the better option.
Right.
And then once we get to, like, the early 2010s, that's when also you get another surge of people coming in.
Yeah, that's when things fucking
really blew up.
So you got Saga, you got stuff like that.
To be fair, Walking Dead, even though now it's obviously The Walking Dead, but back in 2005, that was not, like, a huge book.
No.
It picked up steam later on.
When
it first started coming out, it wasn't.
But the numbers progressively got higher and higher. Yeah. So, like, maybe while it wasn't a success numbers-wise back then to, like, what it would become, like, it did progressively get higher and higher. Like, the numbers from 1 to 2, usually they dropped, they got higher. And they kept getting higher. Yeah. And,
But that kind of started off that movement in the 2000s. But then once you get to 2010, that's when we really see this huge surge. Yeah. Because you get Brian K. Vaughan.
Yeah, Saga in 2012. We had, like, Brubaker took Criminal from Marvel's Icon imprint and brought that over. I mean, he was the first him and Phillips were the first creators to get an exclusive deal.
Image,
Nobody had been given that.
And then Greg Rucka was doing stuff at Image.
Right.
Jason Aaron started doing stuff at Image.
Right.
And so a lot of the Matt Fraction started doing stuff.
Right. So I know we jumped, but that's mostly because, like, it was those in-between years where, like, there was some good stuff coming out, but it was really 2010 where things, like, blew up and they just took off.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Saga's probably the biggest book from Image in the last 10 years.
Easily, dude.
It continues. It was like, the first trade's always on the sales charts every month for the last, like, 8 years. Yeah. No problem.
Right.
And Walking Dead also continues to be a huge giant, too. It's always on the sales charts.
It's crazy to me that it's still fucking sells
as
much as
and
it does.
So, and then you get a variety. I mean, as much as I always make fun of, like, Paper Girls and shit like that, but I do like that if you're into Brian K. Vaughan, you can check that stuff out, but then you can also check out stuff by Greg Rucka, like Lazarus, which I think is one of the... To my opinion, that's the best series from Image, other than, like, Brubaker stuff. Yeah. That come out in the last 10 years.
I agree. I think it's criminally underrated.
I don't understand why that book doesn't get more attention than it should.
It's insane to me. It's
critically acclaimed, though, because if you look at, like, top 10 Image books of the last 10 years, it's always on the list. Yeah. But then I don't hear anyone talk about it, like, pretty much ever.
Yeah, I mean, I think I did an article on the website, on the Comic Con site, and that was in one of my binge-worthy series, like, of books that everybody should pick. Especially when we went on lockdown and there was no new books, I'm like, you need to pick up Lazarus. That's one of the books.
It's really good.
And, like, you had other books. You said Jason Aaron, he brought Southern Bastards, which
that was a huge kind of success as well.
Right. And
critical acclaim, I think it sold pretty well, too.
Yeah. I mean, you had Snyder, he brought Witches. Brian K. Vaughan has done, and then he did, like you said, he did Saga, and then he did Paper Girls. You have writers like Jeff Lemire who continue to put out hits. Yeah. And he was at Vertigo, and then he brought some stuff to
because Vertigo switched up, because he was doing Sweet Tooth at Vertigo, but then obviously Vertigo wasn't Vertigo anymore, really.
And Lemire's writing like 10 books a month. It's insane.
Yeah. Like, taking over X-Men books that no one wanted to do.
Well, that's for another day. We can.
So there was a huge surge, and it's kind of in the sales. I mean, Image went from being in the single-digit market share to double-digit, where it's getting 10, 11, 12, 13, 14%.
Yeah, and we see what happens when their big hits are gone.
Yeah, because it's gone bad in the last couple of years. Saga took a break, and Walking Dead's over.
Yeah.
So now we see that Image is back to single digit numbers just because of those 2 books, which is kind of nuts.
It is kind of nuts, but I mean, we're jumping around a lot. I get it, but a lot of the modern stuff of the last couple of years have really resonated with me. Bitterroot just won an Eisner.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite series. Excellence is another series that I really love. You got series like Die. Kieran Gillen. Can't forget Kieran Gillen. He did Wicked and Divine.
Yeah.
He's doing Ludocrats now. He's doing Die. Die is critically acclaimed. It sells out constantly. Yeah. Dude, there's just so much. And that's what's really dope about Image. I think the biggest takeaway you have to take from 90s to now is the variety of genres that you have at Image, and you have
it's for positive and negatives. With Vertigo, you look at the list of books and it's substantially less published books than Image, because I think it's more curated. I think Vertigo has a bit. I'm not talking about Vertigo from last. I
know what you're talking about.
But if you look at the history of Vertigo, it had a more consistent good book. Yeah, because you had people.
You had people like Karen Berger. You had people like Shelley Bond.
Yeah.
Who they were curating a line of books.
Right.
Image is not curated.
No, it's
everybody for themselves, and they do submit books, and they get approved or they don't get approved, but there's no one person that's trying to corral talent. That's why you have, and some books don't have editors, some books do, talking about curation and editors. Shelley Bond is now on Bitterroot, and I think the second volume is stronger than the first in my opinion. So you lose some of that, and I guess you're right. Sometimes the oversaturation of how many books they're putting out can kind of diminish what's great. Yeah. So maybe if they did,
sometimes. I mean, I know in the last couple of years they've been publishing less books. I can look at Image's list every month. Mm-hmm. It's only a handful of books, but 4 years ago, that list started getting bigger and bigger, and I started looking I don't know what any of this is, and there's only 2 or 3 series that really stand out. But other than that, you get to the lower bottom rung, and I don't know what this is, and then you look at the art, and this isn't that great.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now, I think they're pretty strong. I think with the amount of good titles to the amount of, I don't want to say bad, but mediocre titles, it outweighs it substantially. I think there's way more good books than bad. Maybe you're not reading some of the stuff that I'm reading that it's just something you're not into. But I do think Joshua Williamson is another writer that I think that has come to Image over the past few years that does some great stuff. He did Ghosted, which was a heist thing up with ghosts. That shit was pretty dope. He did Nailbiter, which was awesome, about serial killers. He did Birthright, which is about to end, which is a fantasy book. That book is one of my favorites. It's what happens when that kid goes missing and goes to that fairy tale land in those old 80s movies, right?
Yeah.
But you find out when he can't, he gets stuck there and he doesn't come back, and he comes back and he's a grown man, and it's pretty interesting.
It's
so you have some stuff that, it came out before Die, but so you have some really great stuff that they put out.
You get Scotty Young now doing stuff too.
Dude, you cannot sleep on Scotty Young.
Yeah.
That dude is not only a sick artist, but he is a fantastic writer. I Hate Fairyland is dope and it's really funny, but Middle West.
Yeah, Middle West.
The emotion that he puts into that those book characters.
Because you start seeing what he in the very first issue, you start seeing this is semi-fantastical thing. And there's wizards, but it's kind of weird. But then the tone that he's dealing with and kind of the themes about abuse from his dad and things like that.
Yeah, dude.
Oh shit, this book is really serious, but it's around this veil of being kind of goofy.
Yeah, it's
good. Him and Chip, I think, are the two.
Chip Zdarsky, yeah, dude, he's a great
writer.
Are
the two ones that really stood out in the last few years. Where you kind of associate them with something, and then they come out recently oh shit, you got way more range than I thought.
I got 2 more names we should drop. Couple guys named Matt Fraction and Rick Remender.
Yeah.
We cannot forget about them.
Right.
Let's start with Matt Fraction, dude. Did Sex Criminals. I mean, that fucking book is hilarious, dude. And I think he did Casanova as well. Yeah, that's from is back. Another book he did. And Rick Remender, I think, of the two. I love Matt Fraction. I like some of his Marvel stuff. I think that's kind of what brought me to his Image stuff. But Rick Remender, I like his indie stuff led me to his Marvel stuff. It was like a reverse for me. Because Deadly Class is one of my favorite fucking series. Black Science, fantastic. I haven't read Fear Agent yet.
I love that book.
I do want to check that out. But Low is another good
Low.
one. I mean, he pumps them out, dude. And I think...
What's the other one with the cars?
Death or Glory?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he just, he completely shunned. I kind of like when they shun Marvel and DC and they do their own stuff because there's just like a freedom and you feel the creativity more in their stuff because they're allowed to do what they want.
Right.
You don't ever get that feeling like, ooh, they're holding something back when they're doing creator-owned stuff. And like I talked about Deadly Class. I recorded on the podcast that will have been posted yesterday.
Yeah.
But Remender's characterizations are something that really stand out to me. Like they're always, all his characters are fully realized. Like it's almost like he has to have like this Bible of like their backstories.
Yeah.
Because I like reading volume 1 and knowing what I've read now, I'm like, holy shit, he had this shit planned.
Yeah.
40 issues ago.
Yeah, and he's I think for me what I always liked about him is his character's always really flawed.
Yeah.
Like every one of his main characters is always like he's kind of a piece of shit.
They're scumbags, yeah.
But they're like there's some bit of goodness, or they're like learning. It's like learning to get out of that shittiness to being good.
Mm-hmm.
There's some arc where they're kind of fleshed out people, where they're not 100% good guy. They're not Steve Rogers.
No, far from it.
They're more of a realized person because like no one's really like fully evil or fully good. You just good days, bad days. You're kind of both.
Mm-hmm.
It just depends on the day. So that's what always stood out to me from Rick Remender's stuff.
Yeah, I love his work. And I mean, what are some of your favorite Remenders? Do you read Deadly Class as well?
No, I'm not. More recent stuff I'm not as huge of a fan of.
Okay.
I'm not. I tried Deadly Class a couple of issues. It's 80s punk rock. It's none of the themes or things. I don't like the 80s. I don't really like punk rock or rock music in general. So none of the aesthetic and none of the tone is like up my alley.
Assassins?
That stuff is okay, but it's around this theme of
right.
like 80s punk, and none of that stuff is what I'm into.
Yeah.
So I wasn't into that, but like Fear Agent. My favorite things that he's ever done is Fear Agent and Uncanny X-Force.
Well, Uncanny X-Force is a fucking goddamn. It's a great book,
but
that's not Image, so we don't need to talk about. We'll talk about that.
But I like Low. I have in Black Science. I have all the big library collections.
Black Science is so dope. I picked Black Science #1 and Deadly Class #1. This is like right after I got out of rehab and I got back into comics. I wasn't in comics for like probably like a year, right? Because I was in jail and fucking. Then I went to rehab, and when I got out, it took me a minute, and I jumped right back into like I jumped back into a couple titles that I was kind of like some superhero stuff.
Yeah.
And then I saw Deadly Class and Black Science right next to each other, and I picked both of them up. Deadly Class because that fucking cover, the cover design of #1 with the fucking blue and the black silhouette it grabbed me. And then Black Science, I liked both. I saw Black Science. Man. I know his fucking art.
I love Mateo Scalera.
Yeah, he's a fantastic artist. I opened Black Science. The cover wasn't what grabbed me. I flipped open and I was like, "Holy shit, this is amazing."
He's so fucking good.
He is really good.
And that's another thing too. I guess we should talk about because we're talking mostly about writers.
Yeah.
The other thing too is because you have all these writers that are having the freedom to do like whether it's Matt Fraction, Rick Remender, or Ed Brubaker, it also gives the opportunity to have a bunch of good artists. And I think that's also another thing too. I think this image of modern day is a balance of both.
I agree.
Where you have something like Black Science, where like you like the writing and the storytelling, but it's also Mateo Scalera and his amazing artwork. And so I think a lot of the books we've been talking about, it's color. It's like even like something like Sex Criminals.
It's the whole package.
Or whether it's Rick Remender stuff, because whether we're talking about Low or we're talking about Black Science, the coloring is also very specific to the book.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're getting these new books where it's really focused on all of them working together,
right?
As opposed to the old '90s image where it was about just the artists and not so much the writers.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like Wes Craig on Deadly Class, also Fiona Staples on Saga.
Yeah,
she is fucking amazing. I love her. I love her art, dude.
Right.
Like that's why like I'm and that's another thing too. The best thing about these creator-owned stuff is it's both of the creators that own it.
Yeah.
So you don't see fill-in artists. No. You get a singular vision from these creators.
Yeah, and they'll take pauses. Vision. I mean, something that happens a lot. It's fairly often is pauses where you'll have the first 6 issues come out and they'll take 2 months off, or 3 months off, or whatever.
Yeah, or I think I also noticed like with Image too is like they'll take them. Sometimes if it's a month or two, they take that month or two off. That's when the trade comes out, gives people time that haven't been reading it time to catch up, and then they can start picking up the singles.
Yeah, and so now, and a lot of the books that we mentioned too are associated with both of them. Like Lazarus is Rucka and Lark. It's not just Rucka.
Right.
To the point where I think in all interviews, Greg always makes an effort to talk about how it's Lark's involvement. Like,
it's
100% both of us. It's not just me.
And it can't be because like just because not to take away from the writer either, but just because a writer puts words down on paper, like the artist is what puts a visual aspect to like breathes life into the words with their visuals. And you know, I before we keep going, I don't want to forget Kelly Pseudoconic. I think her Pretty Deadly and Bitch Planet, she's like one of my favorite current writers too. Like Pretty Deadly is poetry to me. You know what I mean? Like her Emma Rios on art, and Kelly Pseudoconic with writing. If like there's 3 volumes out, every single one of them is set in different decades, but it's just beautifully put together. All of it, dude. It's just amazing. So I highly recommend that. And before we close out, we got to talk about Brubaker and Phillips.
Yeah, and that's probably
that's the reason
that sticks out the most.
Yeah, I mean, every book they put out is fucking amazing. Every single fucking thing they put out.
Yeah, their partnership, they've been working together for about 20 years now. And, I mean, it's just something you look forward to. Yeah. You know, with everybody else, or Rick Remender or whoever else, they switch around artists. So one series will have 7 people. And not that Brubaker hasn't done series with other people, too, because he did The Velvet with Steve Epting. But those two together put out stuff all the time.
Yeah, you think of Siegel and Schuster. Yeah. You think of Lee and Kirby. And I think of Brubaker and Phillips. Yeah. The greatest duos in comics for creativity. Yeah. And I challenge somebody to fucking knock Brubaker and Phillips off.
And then you look at the series that have come out in the last 10 years from the two of them. You got Fatale, you got Kill or Be Killed, and you got Criminal.
Fade Out.
Criminal, and it's also got Criminal in different incarnations because you got one-shots, you got the series, you got different things like that. Mm-hmm. And now you're starting to get these standalone like hardcovers, like what we're talking about.
My Heroes Have Always Been Junkies was really good. But that's set in the criminal world, but you don't know that until after.
But it's also its own kind of side thing, too, and it's all contained in one volume as opposed to coming in singles. Right. And that's all in 10 years.
It's crazy, dude.
And all of them are amazing, and all of the ones that we just mentioned, like usually win Eisners or they get nominated at least. And
because how could you not?
They're always on the list, and it's always just one of them the best of. Like it always ends up on best of lists for every time they come out with a new book. And I can't think of anybody else like that. Like as much as we like, I'm not trying to take away from anybody else, but you know, Jason Aaron comes up with a new book. It's going to be a different artist, a different series. Right. They don't always continue to keep working together for 15 years.
I know, it's a shame that we don't see that, dude. Because like Armin Guerra like scalped, and then they did the Goddamned, and they took this long break. Like they, to me, are a really great team, and I would love to see more stuff from those two, right? But at least we have people like Brubaker and Phillips, and like we talked about on the episode that was on Monday about Pulp. That fucking book, we won't get into it here, but that book was phenomenal. Yeah. And finding out the story behind it, why he wrote it,
really adds more.
That like made me fucking sad. I was devastated. I'm like, the thought of him like first of all, it's sad if somebody almost dies, right? Yeah. And that's what happened. In front of
his wife.
Yeah, but like to think about like, and this is on a selfish note, dude. Like, I'm not gonna have any more Brubaker comics. Like, well, I would have cried, dude. I'm not gonna lie. I would have sat in my room and cried like a little bitch. That's exactly what would have went down. I would have been in there, stuck in my thumb, crying like a little bitch. There's no more Brubaker. But thank God, like, he didn't. And I think what came from that, like, horrific, like, scary moment in his life was one of the best stories I've ever read from him. And now what I'm really excited about, if you read the newsletter,
they're going to do more.
They're going to do fucking original hardcovers that are connected. Yeah. And they have 3 planned for 2021.
So it's going to be like Parker.
Amazing. And he said they're going to be longer than Pulp. Yeah. So, like, they're going to be like 100 issues. So they're going to be producing more work in this format than they were in like the single issues. And dude, I'm all for that. I love hardcovers.
If I had to pick the 2 things that stand out to me the most would be Lazarus from Greg Rucka and Michael Lark, and anything that Edward Baker and Sean Phillips did. Those are the 2 from Image that to me are always going to be, because they've also been publishing Lazarus since 2012, maybe 2013. Yeah. Until now, it's still coming out now.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the things that stand out are Brubaker, Phillips, and then Saga. I think Saga just like it completely changed Image for the better, and I think it helped lure big names to it because they're like, oh shit, look what Brian K. Vaughan did with this book. Yeah, and I think that enabled more high tier talent to come. And you know, and one more thing before we stop, I cannot forget to mention Todd McFarlane, Eric Larson, Spawn, Savage Dragon. They're still going strong. Todd's not drawing.
The new Spawn just came out this week.
And it was good.
No,
I enjoyed it.
Of course
I fucking bought that. Ken Lashley, bro, on art. I'm about that.
Also, we got a new Witchblade. Well, there's a reprint, but we got Witchblade.
Reprint of Witchblade, yeah. And so, but like the fact that Spawn and Savage Dragon are still going... Eric Larson's still writing and drawing Savage Dragon.
Yeah, that's insane.
Issue 250 just came out. I love the Dragon comics, so I thought that was a great issue. And then, Spawn... McFarlane is still writing it,
and he's always been involved.
Yeah, he never lets it go to anybody. Even when he brings in new writers, that's why they leave, because he's still
ghostwriting behind them.
Right. So, yeah, Modern Image is, in my opinion, it's just as exciting, if not more exciting, than what the '90s were. Exciting in the sense that like the '90s were exciting because like that art. I love.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just want to look at something dope.
To me, the key word is variety. That's the number one thing that Image has going for it. Because I think it hurts sometimes because I think that's why we get criminally underrated books like Lazarus, where you get tons and tons of sales of Saga, but then it gets drowned out by sex criminals and Saga and Paper Girls. And I'd say that those books are bad, but it's just I wish some of that attention flowed over to
but titles.
Like Low from Remender always gets.
But it's because he fucking doesn't put it out frequently because he doesn't want the art to suffer and he waits.
No, but you know what I mean. Like it gets more drowned down by the other books.
And that's the good thing about Modern Image is that there is a book for everybody. Yeah. Nobody is excluded, no matter what genre, no matter what type of writing, no matter what type of art. Yeah. You will find something at Modern Image, and I think that's why they're probably my favorite publisher.
Yeah,
not probably. They're my favorite publisher. Well, they are.
For me, it's still Marvel.
Of course, it's still Marvel. Well, DC got bumped down a little bit. Image, Marvel. Fantagraphics is kind of like in there too because I love Love and Rockets, as you guys probably know if you watched the last couple videos. But that's it.
Yeah. So definitely write in the comments kind of what you guys think. What's stood out for you?
Yeah. What are your favorite books?
Maybe we missed that maybe came out in 2000 because like we mentioned. Yeah. There are obviously big books that came out in 2000, but we're not familiar with every book.
We only have so much time in the day, dude. I mean, I don't sleep because I'm editing video constantly. So
and interviewing people.
So I can only read so much. So if you guys think we missed something, drop those in the comments below. And make sure you follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at The Comic Lounge. If you don't want to drop a comment below, you want to talk to us directly, email us, thecomicloungepod@gmail.com. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you're notified every time we drop a new video.
Check out the podcast.
Yeah, check out the podcast.
Spotify, any podcast
iTunes, Podbean. Yeah, it's on all those. And on that note, we're out.